Part 5, DMC Devil May Cry, released in 2013. Hello, I am EmptyHero, and this is DMC Devil May Cry, a game that can SMFCAB, suck my fat cock and balls. Some people say DMC Dante's man-child has a bad reputation because Dante's hair is a different color, and fans of the old series are entitled babies that cannot deal with change. The people who say that are, of course, entitled assholes that can't deal with criticism. And since these people hate criticism so much, let's break down the actual problems with this game into 5 parts. Number 1. This game does not need to exist. There are 3 reasons to make a Devil May Cry game. The first would be to continue or expand upon the established lore. In DMC Delightful Minge Crust, the events that unfold are all retreads of events from earlier games, and it serves as more of a soft reboot than a sequel. The second reason would be to improve on the fast-paced action gameplay. In that regard, DMC Dykes Munch Carpets falls short. The third reason, of course, is to generate an easy paycheck, but for the reasons we're about to discuss, that didn't exactly pan out. Number 2. There are very few enemy types, and the ones that we have are poorly designed. Regular enemies look like a fat person sat on an action figure with one butt cheek, a pocket watch with their other butt cheek, then smush the pieces together via some unholy twerking ritual. You'll spend most of the game fighting the same 5 assholes who occasionally get dipped in red or blue paint. Bosses fare a little better, and include the likes of Eurotrash Vagina Face, Bill O'Reilly's Ego, one of those things I keep finding in my dumpster. They smell awful, they taste awful too, and Hillary Clinton. While the bosses are generally visually interesting, they are only weak to Dante's starter weapon Rebellion, and like an ugly girl on prom night, they go down without much of a fight. Which brings us to our next point. 3. The weapons are too similar to each other and aren't exciting to use. Dante's Sword Rebellion is extremely underpowered. Aside from boss fights, you'll only use it to keep your style score inflated while switching between other weapons. The 2 devil weapons, the fist and the axe, are practically the same weapon, save for the axe's long-range attack and the fist's ability to break through an enemy's guard with a charged attack. The angelic frisbees are great for crowd control, but do little damage, and the angel scythe does so little damage that it's only useful for keeping your style points high while fighting blue enemies. I would also like to note that DMC Delightful Mongoloid Cavalcade continues the series' tradition of guns being absolutely useless, save for knocking harpies out of the sky. Speaking of harpies, let's move on to the next problem. Number 4. Cat moves her mouth when my cock is not inside of it. The scenario and dialogue in DMC Delicious Monkey Cum are okay, and even if you don't like them, you can skip the cutscenes with the push of a button. That is safe for when Cat shows up during gameplay. This Courtney Love understudy has a nasty habit of forcing Dante to walk slowly down empty corridors while she leaks exposition out of her gaping, constantly raped by demons vagina. I can't help but feel like old Dante wouldn't put up with this shit, but the more I think about it, having a hobo girlfriend can be kind of nice. She always knows where to get free soup. You can drop her off literally anywhere at the end of the night, and after you secrete your tincture from your underneath creature into her only redeeming feature, she always has a bottle of Windex and a balled up newspaper on hand to clean up. And speaking of words smeared with semen, let's move on to the final problem with this game. Number 5. The worst public relations I've seen for a video game since literally anything having to do with the mighty number 9. DMC Dilating Mother's Cornholes Dante is abrasive at first, but genuinely cares about his brother, his friends, and the plight of humanity in general. The only time we see him act like an asshole is in a scene where his goal is to provoke an angry reaction that will allow him to save the world. Yet, somehow there's this misconception that this version of Dante is a childish, foul-mouthed jerk-off. In reality, this better describes the game's creative design team boss / part-time shit-kicker, Tanim Antonitis. He poisoned the well months before the game's release by actively insulting previous Devil May Cry games, as well as the people that enjoyed them. Well, here's a newsflash, Tanim. If you insult the wonderful, beautiful, sensual people that could have purchased your game, those exceptional, shapely, intelligent people, will probably buy my ebooks, Your Pillory's Invasion and Your 2 Barack's Apocalypse instead. Please. You don't see me insulting people that read Naked Lunch, the drummer from Wings insulting people that like the Beatles, or Notch slapping Legos out of the hands of autistic children. I mean, he does that, but you don't see him doing it. Tanim has squandered the works of dozens of talented, hardworking employees, And while I'm not saying this is the best Devil May Cry game, because it's not, it's undoubtedly just okay. And it's a shame that all those poor European code monkeys, in addition to having hot sandy Muslim cocks jammed down their throats on a daily basis, are also suffering reduced residuals. DMC Dingus Milk Connoisseurs appears regularly on sale for $5, and at that price, you should give it a chance. I have also heard that the DLC fixes many of the problems that I've mentioned, but to be perfectly honest, after playing this game twice, I'd rather spend those $9 on some tacos.
Fuck.
Part 6, Vergil's Downfall, released in 2013. DMC Devil May Cry VD Vergil's Downfall is the worst type of VD you could ever acquire. Vergil's 15-minute long quest to become the Edge Master Supreme is everything bad from the main campaign compressed into a metaphorical diamond of shit. Despite taking place in hell, Vergil's Downfall borrows less from Dante's Inferno and more from Dante's backlog of recycled enemies and environmental assets. Levels consist entirely of floating pebbles so lazily slapped together that even areas within the DLC are repeated. In the main campaign, Dante is forced to flee from or chase powerful forces, utilizing dynamic level deformation to achieve a fairly impressive sense of urgency. In Vergil's Downfall, Vergil warps between floating platforms for no reason other than to pad out the length of the DLC. VD, Vaginal Discharge, continues DMC deported Mexican children's tradition of wasting buttons due to a complete lack of context sensitivity. For example, dodging up and down are mapped to separate buttons rather than depending on whether or not Vergil is already in the air when the dodge button is pressed. Worse yet, Vergil cannot lock on to specific enemies. To utilize the manual lock-on feature, you'll actually need to purchase the PlayStation 4 or Xbox One exclusive edition of DMC, otherwise known as the "It Won't Be Available as Part of a Humble Bundle, so No One Will Ever Play It" edition. In terms of combat, Vergil's Downfall is an unfinished mess. Though Ninja Theory removed the elemental enemy gimmick that plagued the main campaign, they forgot to add a new gimmick to replace it. As a result, you can win most fights via the sort of mindless button mashing one normally witnesses when a retard plays with a Flintstones phone. Instead of having multiple weapons like Dante, Vergil just has a slower Yamato that does more damage, and a faster Yamato that has an incredibly inaccurate moveset. A grand total of 2 new enemies that have 0 thematic connection to Vergil or Hell, and 1 lazily slapped together boss fight round out the experience. From the cutscenes that were made by applying a graphite pen filter to unfinished storyboard drawings, you might have expected Vergil to fight twisted versions of Cat, Dante, and even his own mother. Instead, those confrontations end quickly via cutscenes, and levels just end abruptly. I can't help but feel like a larger DLC was planned, then scrapped when the developers realized they didn't have the talent to pull it off. Considering how inflated the scores were for the main campaign, I did a little research on how this DLC was initially received, and much to my surprise, the usual places glanced over the sloppy movesets and the lack of new content in order to gush over the poetic story. On paper, Vergil's Downfall concerns a narcissist failing to come to terms with the insecurities that fuel his desire for power, but the dialogue is so rushed and amateurish that Vergil just comes off as a pissy teenager with mommy issues instead. And to be perfectly honest, it's hard to take Vergil's suffering seriously when he looks like a Super Saiyan taking a shit for half of the DLC. While I previously had a good laugh at the bribe-accepting shills who called the original campaign's writing Shakespearean, I was absolutely disgusted to find out that multiple professional reviewers lovingly compared VD Volva Drupich to T.S. Eliot's poem, The Hollow Men. This is such a mind-bogglingly stupid claim that I can't help but take this opportunity to recite The Hollow Men in its entirety while unedited footage of Vergil's Downfall plays. If you can find any similarities, please write them down, wait for your check from Ninja Theory to clear, then post them in the comments below. Mr. Kurtz, he dead. A penny for the old guy. We are the Hollow Men. We are the stuffed men, leaning together, headpiece filled with straw. Alas, our dried voices, when we whisper together, are quiet and meaningless, as wind in dry grass, or rat's feet over broken glass in our dry cellar. Shape without form, shade without color, paralyzed force, gesture without motion. Those who have crossed with direct eyes to death of the kingdom remember us, if at all, not as lost violent souls, but only as the hollow men, the stuffed men. Eyes I dare not meet in dreams in death's dream kingdom, these do not appear. There the eyes are sunlight on a broken column. There is the tree swinging, and voices are in the wind singing more distant and more solemn than a fading star. Let me be no nearer in death's dream kingdom. Let me also wear such deliberate disguises. Rat's coat, crow's skin, crossed staves in the field, behaving as the wind behaves. Not nearer, not that final meeting in the twilight kingdom. This is the dead land. This is the cactus land. Here the stone images are raised. Here they receive the supplication of a dead man's hand under the twinkling of a fading star. Is it like this in death of the kingdom? Waking alone at the hour when we are trembling with tenderness? Lips that would kiss form prayers to broken stone. The eyes are not here. There are no eyes here in this valley of dying stars. In this hollow valley, this broken jaw of our lost kingdom. In this last of meeting places, we grope together and avoid speech. Gathered on this beach of the tumid river, sightless unless the eyes reappear as the perpetual star. Multifoliate rows of death's twilight kingdom, the hope only of empty men. Here we go round the prickly pear. Prickly pear, prickly pear. Here we go round the prickly pear at 5 o'clock in the morning. Between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act falls the shadow, for thine is the kingdom. Between the conception and the creation, between the emotion and the response falls the shadow. Life is very long. Between the desire and the spasm, between the potency and the existence, between the essence and the descent falls the shadow. For thine is the kingdom, for thine is, life is, for thine is the... This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. Now what the fuck that had to do with Devil May Cry makes no sense to me. Vergil's downfall wasn't a metaphor for the longings of desperate men, the hopelessness of unachievable goals, or the inevitability of death. It was a hastily assembled collection of cliches that would make even the most cringe-inducing deviant art posters shake their massive water-filled heads. As a result, I can't say where Devil May Cry will go next. If another game is ever made, it can't follow the reboot since so few people liked it. It can't directly follow up on Devil May Cry 2, since having Dante stomping around in hell would literally be Dante's Inferno, and EA already beat Capcom to the punch. Odds are, Devil May Cry 6 would either be a prequel starring Sparta, a sequel starring Nero as he follows his dad and uncle into hell, or maybe they could go in an opposite direction, and instead of being a big macho guy fighting demons, you could play as a hot thought fighting angels instead. Well guys, thanks for listening. If you like my video, you could subscribe, you could tweet about it, you could buy one of my novels or audiobooks, or you could send me a tasteful photograph of your buttock cheeks. Either way, thanks for your time and goodbye!